Okay, so we are having shiur tonight, as you can see. It is Mishlei 1611. And small disclaimer, I guess, is this is I think this is a very difficult pasuk. I have not really had a chance to prepare it much. And I'm still completely exhausted from Rosh Hashanah and the fast, and I'm in Connecticut and I had a long day. I might decide to end a little bit early. What I'm hoping is going to happen is we get a really good idea and then that energizes me, or the analysis energizes me, but I might like abruptly call it quits. Also, sleep has not been that good, but I really wanted to do today, even though I was going to cancel, because this pasuk, I don't want to prejudice us, but it's going to be hard to read this pasuk during the Aseres Ymei Teshuvah and not associate to the time period that we're in. I felt like if there's any chance that this pasuk could shed light on, the time that we're in right now, then it's definitely worth exerting ourselves for. All right. So the pasuk is 1611. Peles umozne mishpat lashem ma'asehu kol avnei kis. Now, one of the difficulties in this pasuk is the facts. Okay, so a peles, the Metzudas ציון says. Okay, actually, first of all, the BDB, which is the go-to dictionary in all of Torah, just says balance or scale. Okay, so it's possible that Peles and Moznaim are two synonyms. Okay, and actually, I'm going to do something I don't usually do. I'm going to go to the English here already. ArtScroll says a scale and just balances are Hashem's. His deeds are like weights in a pouch. Rav Hirsch says, as just balances and scales are God's, and all the weights in your pocket are his work. Oh, you know what? I didn't even notice this. I think he connects this to the next pasuk. So we're not really going to use this, although you do see he says balances and scales. And then Alter says a balance and just scales. Okay, so we could say it like this. Okay, Peles, let's say a scale. Actually, let's go like this. A Peles, which is a scale, umozne mishpat, and just moznayim, okay, balances, lashem, belong to Hashem or are for Hashem. Let's just say belongs to Hashem. Actually, let's say are Hashem's. Are Hashem's. Ma'asehu kol avnei kis. Okay. His actions or deeds, I guess all stones of the pouch. All right. So that is one translation. Okay. Another way to translate it would be a scale and balances of justice are Hashem's. Okay, etc. So in other words, actually, when it says just moznaim, just, or also you could say calibrated. Okay. Yeah. Let me just make this all in one line here. Okay, there we go. Yeah. Okay. So that is, and Metzudas ציון says, Peles is inyan yosher, kmo Peles magal raglacha, husha al mate hamoznaim, kihu miyasher hamishkal. So I don't know exactly what he's saying, but I think what he's saying is that the word Peles means straight. Okay. Because there's another pasuk in Mishlei that says like a straight path for your feet. And he says, V'hushal, and this is applied like analogously to the mate hamoznaim, the staff of the balances. Now, I don't know how their balances were back then. I don't know if it's talking about like I just don't know. Okay, so like this is part of why I'm uncertain about this pasuk. And he says the kis is amtachas v'sak is just a pouch. Okay, fine. Sadigon, here's more uncertainty. Sadigon says ki ha'ozen umozne hatzedek lashem. Okay, that the scale and balance pans, I guess, because moznaim is related to the word ozen, which is like ears. So it means like the things that like stick out, I guess, or like the dish-like things. Umasehu kamosha shokelim b'mishkalos. So the scale and balance pans, I guess the righteous scale and balance pans are Hashem's. Umasehu kamosha shokelim b'mishkalos. And his deeds are as if weighed with weights. All right. I'm not even gonna try the Targum here. Oh, you know what? Hold on just a second. I did not save the right file. How's this notes? Okay. Yeah. All right. So let's move these out of the way. Let's put Sadigon over here. Oops. And then we'll move these out of the way. Okay, then we've got art scroll and we've got altar. Art scroll and altar are pretty much the same. I guess altar is slightly different because he says all the weights in his purse are his work. So let's do this and then we'll move these. Yeah, okay. So that's why I didn't ask you to translate this because it's really hard. Okay. So here are our translations. All right, let me post this in the chat. I know everyone is usually careful to use their hand raising feature anyway, but I just want to mention that I am not in my usual spot, so I don't have my second monitor. Yeah, Isaiah?
Okay. First of all, can you hear me? I'm using
Yes.
different headphones. Okay, great.
Yep, I can. Well,
Um, so whose actions are the, the stones? Not say who. It has to be.
so I
So like
think
it's
it has to be
God,
a
but I'm
him.
not sure it has to
Yeah, I know. You're sensing the same weirdness that I'm sensing, which is I think you have to read it as God's because God is the only person in the pasuk. So the question, I guess, is why are we talking about God's actions? Seems like it should be talking about our actions. Is that what was bothering you?
be. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Next is my dad.
Yeah, what's the first half of the pasuk? What's the havamina? That
Okay.
justice is going to be someone else but God?
Okay. So what is the Hava Amina? Meaning, what would we have thought before reading this pasuk? Um, this pasuk, right? Um, so um, so you were saying that would we think it was someone else other than God? Is that what you just said?
Yeah, does justice come from somewhere else beside?
Yeah, right.
We try to do our best with justice, but
Yeah.
ultimate justice comes from
Okay,
God.
so would we have thought that justice does, that I guess scales of justice do not belong to God, or that his scales are not just, or something else? Yeah, I think there's several possibilities we could say there. Okay, Rivki?
I think like a little similar to what Isaiah was saying, but on the second half, like why are we talking about? I feel like in our like Mahalik, we don't really speak about like hush. The focus is on our decisions. So like I guess what does it actually mean and why is it bringing up his deeds? Like, and I just don't
Right.
understand what it means that all stone. Like I'm not understanding what it's supposed to convey.
Yeah. Okay, so let's, I guess, translate that into, I mean, there's several questions you're asking in there, but the question I heard at the end was, what is the, I guess, if this is all about Hashem and his actions, what is the practical application for us? Yeah, Ayala.
So what exactly are Peles, Monday Night Mishlei, and on the case, and like what is the scenario, I guess?
Yeah, okay, so what exactly are these Peles, Peles and Moznaim? Actually, let's just say this. What is the what are um what is this a mushal for? Okay. And by that I mean what is represented by Peles, I keep on saying Peles and Moznaim. What do the stones and the pouch represent? Because I think we can all agree that this is not literal. God does not have an actual physical balance up there. So this one's definitely a metaphor, but the question is what's a metaphor for? Yeah, Ariel?
Yeah, I was gonna ask that, but also like what's the difference between the two?
The Peles and Moznaim?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I'm gonna actually ask that with an if, which is if there is a difference between the Peles and Moznaim, what is that difference? Oh, you know what? I forgot something here. Okay, so this is another fact here. Okay, so the Malbim has a different translation. Okay, he says so the Malbim says a Peles is a actually sorry, hold on. Is it the Malbim? It was not clear to me whether this is the Malbim or someone else, but there definitely are people who translate Apelles as a plumb line, okay, and Moznaim. So a plumb line is from what I understand. So I think we're familiar with what a level is, right? It's the wooden thing with a little bubble in it, and it's used for making sure that something is parallel to the ground. So a plumb line does the same thing, but measuring something vertically. I'm not exactly sure what it is now that I talk about it. Okay, but if you know what a plumb line is and you have an interpretation there, then great. A device. Actually, let me just look at the Wikipedia for a second, or if someone knows what a plumb line is. Plumb line. A line with a plumb attached to it, used for finding the depth of water or determining the vertical on an upright surface. Yeah, is there more? A plumb bob level or plummet is a weight, usually with a pointed tip on the bottom, suspended from string and used as vertical direction as a reference line, or a plumb line is a precursor to the spirit level and used to establish a vertical datum. Okay, so something for determining like evenness. A device used for determining vertical datum. Okay, I don't know what to do with that, but yeah, anyway. So my point though to Ariel is some meforshim explicitly state that Hellas and Mozaim are exactly the same thing. Others say that there's a slight difference. So for our purposes, we'll treat it as just another word for scales, unless we are compelled to say otherwise.
Yeah, but then my question is, why mention it just redundant then?
Yeah, I mean, maybe it was used for different purposes. Like it'd be kind of like in English if you said what would be a good English thing? Something that like if you looked it up in the dictionary, it would say the same definition, but for us, like if you said, for example, this is a bad example, but if you said like like a pen and a pencil in the hands of Hashem, and really both are writing instruments, and maybe you're only saying it just because like, to show that you mean writing implements, whereas if you said pen, you might think, oh, it means permanent, or if it's pencil, it might mean, erasable. But if you say both, then you're covering the entire genre, So I'd say if it means the same thing, then it's just using like, a variety for that reason. Okay, Ben.
So I also was really wondering what the difference was, but now that you're describing it, is it possible it's like one device with different parts, right? So, we see the scales of justice, with the big, spine in the middle, that would be maybe the palace, and then the plates that get weighed across, comparing one to the other, are the Monday Night Mishlei.
Yeah, so that's actually how I want to understand Sadhugon, that the scale is the thing that they're like hanging from, and then the Moznaim are like the two sides. So that would be a good way to describe it. So it's describing one advice, and then if you're going to learn it that way, then you might need to say that each one of these things is a different idea. So I think that's a good interpretation.
But then, go in line with that, usually like you're going to put something on one side and a pre-weighted knowledge measure that's accurate on the other side. So that would maybe be the Avnei Kiss.
Right. Yeah. So part of the difficulty here also is that I don't know what these. Oh, you know what? I might hold on just a second. I just thought of a place I could look. Is there? Yeah, Moznei Tzedek. Is a pasuk in Mishpatim, and maybe in Sefer Devarim. Let's see here. No, it's in Vayikra. Okay, so there's a resource in Al Torah called the Olam HaMikra. So at the bottom. Maybe they don't have it on this one. Huh. Olam HaMikra. That they have pictures of like archaeological stuff. Okay, fine. I'm not in Far Rockaway right now, but I have a thing that might have pictures. The difficulty here is, for all we know, this could be a completely different kind of scale than what we've seen, or it could be a completely different kind of usage. So, for example, I read somewhere when I was like just preparing this that where did I read this? Oh, you know what? I saw this on the BDB. So click on Moznaim. It says balances for weighing money. you know? So that's just something that like, you know, in hindsight, I'm like, okay, yeah, they had to weigh their money because they don't know what it's made of, you know, what it's made of yet. But I don't associate, when I think of a balance, I think of either like in a lab or I think of like buying vegetables, you know? I don't think of using it to like weigh money, you know? But if the implication is weighing money, so then maybe it has to do with like detecting counterfeits, you know? So like this is part of what makes this puzzle so difficult is like we don't really know what we're supposed to associate to when we see this. So these are all good guesses, but like, you know,
Right. And so another thing that also,
Yeah.
one of the first we were talking about, interesting that they changed the word mishpat to tzedek. So, right, like
oh yes, right.
mishpat and not tzedek.
Yeah, that is very interesting, right? So Sadigon does translate as tzedek. Now, it's possible that the reason why he translates it as tzedek is because since mishpat can mean just or calibrated, then he wants to emphasize that it's talking about scales of justice, not finely measured scales, you know? So it might be that he's like weighing in on that, but yeah, it is a good observation that he changes the word. What does the Targum here say? I think the tritusa just means like of truth, so I'm not sure. Yeah, okay. Yeah, this is again, it makes me very uncomfortable to proceed with factual ignorance like this, but we kind of really have no choice right now. Yeah, Isaiah?
So, what is the relationship between God and the scale or and balance?
Yeah.
Like, it says it's his or to him, but I don't understand like what that would mean.
Right. Okay. So what, oops, what exactly is not the difference between, is the relationship between Hashem and the scales? Okay. It says that they belong to him, but what does that imply? Yeah, Ricky?
I feel like this is a very like your dad question, so sorry if I'm stealing it. But I'm wondering what exactly, like we know, like, is this true? Because I feel like we also know that like that's a Sanhedrin and like we also are given like judgment and justice in our world. So what aspect of it is it actually talking about here?
Okay, I heard a couple questions in there. I heard, is it true? And I heard that we also have justice, and I'm not sure what the question that is. So what would make you tell me your question again?
Like essentially, I really saw it as like the same because meaning it's saying that like balance and justice and all these things are Hashem's.
Yeah.
But so then it's
Oh,
true
so you're
is
saying what
that
about
we
ours?
know that Hashem's. Sorry, what'd you say?
You're saying what about ours then?
Yeah, meaning like if
Yeah.
they're his, then where do we fit in?
Okay,
With
right.
us?
That's a good, okay. So, and if these belong to Hashem, what about us and our scales and our justice? Yeah, okay, good. Ayala?
What is the relationship between the two halves of the pasuk?
Yeah,
Like, it's definitely not opposites, I think. So
right.
what would
What is
opposite?
the relationship between the two halves? Yeah, I mean, on the surface, it sounds like this is just the complete mushal, but it does make another statement in the second half of his deeds. Yeah, it's tough puzzle. Okay, next, you dead?
Who's the target for this puzzle?
Yeah. Okay, right. So who is the audience of this pasuk? Is this like every person, someone inclined to use unjust scales, someone who is making a specific mistake about Hashem or in his justice? Yeah, Alex?
This might be a dumb question, but why are we assuming the second clause is about Hashem? Like, could it be a secondary person?
Yeah, so I wanted to try reading it that way, but since it says his actions and the only other subject in the pasuk is Hashem, then I think that's the only way to read it. And in fact, I saw one of the meforshim said, and actually this might be relevant. Give me 1 second. Yeah, so in the cluster of pasukim that we've been doing, I mentioned this last time that last week's pasuk says kesem al sifsei melech b'mishpat lo yimel piv. There's a divination on the lips of a king. His mouth will not what was it? Injustice, his mouth will not betray, right? And then there's our pasuk. Then the next pasuk is the abomination of kings is the doing of wickedness, and then the favor of kings, and then the wrath of the king, and then in the light of the king's face. So I don't know about all of them, but one of the meforshim says that our pasuk is identifying the king in the previous pasuk as Hashem. So he's learning it, I guess, that this whole cluster is about Hashem. But the simple answer to your question is that whenever you have a pronoun, then you identify based on the antecedent, meaning the subject that was mentioned, and the only one that was mentioned is Hashem. So I don't think there's a way to read it otherwise, and I didn't see anyone who read it otherwise. So it's a legitimate question. But yeah. Okay, Isaiah?
Do we ask why is it mentioning a pouch?
Okay, that time I did not hear you.
Did we ask like why is it mentioning a pouch? It could just
No, we
be
did
just
not.
stones.
Yeah. We just asked what do the stones and the pouch represent? And then I'll ask, I think is what you're asking, why is it even necessary to mention the pouch? Couldn't it just have mentioned the stones, and either we'd infer where they're kept, or we'd say that their location is irrelevant. Yeah, Rifki?
This is like not an actual question I think we're gonna write, but I'm just curious, is that the same Hebrew word like kis for like what we learned about David HaMelech with Goliath?
I don't think so. There's an easy way to check. I think, well, I know they use for sling, they use a kela, and it looks like that word kis is not mentioned in Sefer Shmuel. So unless I do this, let's see. Oop, that did not work. Yeah, I don't think it is used there. Yeah. So yeah. Okay. Anything else? I will ask on the stones. Where are the stones here? Yeah, hold on just 1 second here. Let me move this. Yeah, Rookie.
Did we also ask about coal or no?
Yeah, that was what I was gonna ask. Yeah. Okay, good. Why mention all, right? What is being added by that? Okay. Yeah, that's what the practical application is, right? Yeah. Okay, I think we got them. I think we got all the questions. So let me start copying and pasting them into the chat. It's a tough one. There's 1 through 5. Yeah.
What's the shot of like stones of the pouch with relation to the scales and balances? Like I feel like this is talking, sounds to me like it's about a specific thing. Like you would use the stones on the scales. I don't understand what it's talking about.
I didn't quite catch the question. Say again?
To me, like stones in a pouch sounds like either the money or the counterbalance that you put on the scales when making a purchase.
Yeah.
And like I feel like this is referring to something that if we had this system of buying and selling, we would know exactly what this is talking about, but we don't have this system. So I guess that's kind of the question is like, is there like a specific phenomenon that we're kind of missing that this is talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to write that because that's kind of what I've been like trying to apologize for this whole time of like, I don't know if we're missing information. I'm assuming that the stones are the things that you use to check what is being weighed. Like that's the counterweight, and so if you're buying, again, in the vegetable analogy, if you're buying 5 pounds of something, then you use the 5-pound stones or whatever. Yeah, but again, it's your guess is as good as mine. Yeah, Rifki?
So just methodology wise,
yeah,
in terms of thinking of an idea, I really have no idea where to start for where actual actions fit into this. Like this seems like it's teaching us about Hashem as a being, but not like where do we even go?
Yeah. Yep. I think that's where you have to start, right? Is that it's teaching about Hashem and then thinking about those ideas and then, searching in your mind for a practical application as you go. But it does seem to be about Hashem. I mean, there's no other Mishlaic actors here, so it does seem like a pretty universal idea. So yeah. All right, let's have, oh yeah, Ayala.
Maybe this is touched on in the Havamina question, but I guess more specifically, would you have thought that these just scales are not Hashem's, or that Hashem's scales are not just?
Right. Yeah, I think those are the two possible Havaminas, right? Well, we thought that these don't belong to God, or that his scales are not just.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's another one. I mean, you could also say, or exclusively to God. Or exclusively to God, meaning maybe you think that a human being could also have the just scales, and then they're saying no, only to Hashem, Okay, let us think about this and see where we get. No promises. And I think Rivki's question methodologically is a good question, which is like, where do you start? I don't know. I would start with like just thinking about the mushal and seeing what we come up with here. And I'd also say start simple, meaning think of the scales and then the stones, and then if you can differentiate between the pellets and the mosmayim, great, or the stones in the pouch, great. But yeah. Okay, yeah. All right, what do you got?
All right, I have some scattered ideas, and I think for this specific pasuk, I'm going to use the methodology of whatever comes to mind. Just go with it.
Okay, I'm right with you. Yeah, we gotta pull out all the stops.
I want to and I want to say that this has to do with din, in the sense of like judging your behavior or actions, and the scale or the plumb line, whatever it is, it's a mushal for that. And I'm getting this because back in the day, there was this concept of weighing of the hearts, in Egyptian mythology.
Yeah.
So it's not so far-fetched, to use this as like as a method to convey an idea.
Yeah.
Like using weights and scales.
Right.
So I'm going with that. I'm not saying that specific idea is the truth, but that message is can be conveyed. So I want to say simple right now is that God's judgment is perfect with your behavior and your actions in Olam Hazeh. Like he's the only one that can judge it, as perfect as possible, fairness or with integrity or with whatever you want to call it. And maybe that's what the stones are. I mean, the stones are, are your own, stuff on the weights, whatever you may think it is. And he's the only one that can judge it perfectly. So whatever you think personally it is, either it's big stones or small stones, and the stone could be your chatayim or your actions or whatever. It doesn't really matter what you think. It's really, it's really on him.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's mishpat, really.
Okay. All right. So I'm right with you there in terms of your framework. I think the difficulty is the pasuk says that his actions are the weights, not your actions.
Yeah, well, that's that's exactly the point. Like his actions is what is God's action? It's his din. It's his judgment.
No, but
That's
isn't
his
the,
action.
I thought you were saying the scales is God's judgment. So in a scale, you've got the thing that is doing the judging, which is the scale, and then you've got the thing that is being judged, which is what's on the scale.
Yeah, but that's God's scale.
Right. So God's scale is what is doing the judging, right? Like that's what you have to line up with. And then, but isn't he judging our actions? He's not judging his own actions.
God is the scale is God's tool.
Okay.
But he's ultimately doing the judgment. The reason why the pasuk is, calling it a scale is because for our purposes to translate it to us, that's just a a method of conveying this idea that God is going to be the one doing the judging.
Right.
And it just represents fairness and balance and whatever that's what a scale is for. And
yeah, no, that part I get. The part that I'm struggling with is why say God's actions are the stones instead of your actions are the stones. I'm just missing that point. Maybe it's an obvious point.
Oh, you're saying why is it God's actions, God's these
like let's say for example, let's say I'm a jeweler or whatever, right? And let's say like you bring me gold and I want to see if it's real gold. So I use my scale and I'm the jeweler, and then I take your gold and I put it on the scale and see if it weighs the right amount. But this is saying
I have an idea. Maybe it's because that just taking it away from God's perspective for a second, from the human perspective, like if we were to decide, meaning like when we do chatayim or whatever, we may think it's small for us, or we may think it may be big for us, but in reality, there's no way of us judging it. Only God, it's God's stones, as in like he's the only one who can make that decision. Like for instance, like Avram, Moshe and Aaron, like Moshe Rabbeinu, like he hit the rock, but for him it was a very big fate. But for us, for me, like it would be nothing. So he can only judge that.
Okay. All right, I think that's a good answer. So so he is judging our actions, but he's using his standards, which are the which are the stones. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
His scale, his standards, and I want to maybe I don't know if this is getting a little overzealous here with my idea, but maybe the difference between a plumb line and a scale is it's kind of representing two different facets of din.
Okay.
Like a scale. Look, they're both. I just want to be clear. They're both in the realm of like precision in the sense of like how he's going to be din. How he's going to give din because he's God. It's true judgment. But the differences between the two is subtle. Like the balance, the weight. It's kind of like what's fair. It's just to balance things out. And also, but the plumb line, it seems to be a little bit more precise, more it's gonna like less, I hate using this term, but less it's more integrity with it because it has to be more precise in the sense of like it has to be perfectly straight. Like I don't know, but that's what I got so far.
Okay, I like this approach. I think what I'm going to do, just to make sure we're on the same page and just to anchor this into a what do you call it, source here, is I don't want to get into this entire thing, but just to refer to the Rambam's third chapter of Hilchos Teshuvah here. Oh, that's not my good version. I just want to show where the Rambam talks about Ariel's idea. Who's an Avon? Okay, so this is in the third chapter of Hilchos Teshuvah. Okay, we're not gonna go into this in depth, but the Rambam says, each and every person has zechuyos, which loosely translates as merits, and avonos, iniquities, demerits, whatever you want to call it, flaws. Yeseros alavonos of tzaddik, someone whose zechuyos are greater than his avonos is righteous. Umisha avonos of yeseros al zechuyosav rasha, and someone whose avonos are greater than his zechuyos is evil. Mechza lemechza benoni. Half and half is someone who's is a benoni, a middle person. Okay, and then he says same is true for the country, same is true for the world. And then he says Adam shavanosov merubin al zechuyosav, a person whose flaws outnumber his merits. Miyad hu meis berisho, immediately dies in his wickedness. Okay, again, a lot of problems here. Okay, I'm just reading the facts. But then the point is, he says, v'shikol zeh, this weighing, eno lefi minyan hazachiyos va'avonos, is not based on the quantity of the zechiyos va'avonos, ela lefi godlan, but it is based on their degree or their magnitude or their size. Yesh zechus sheikneged kam avonos. You can have a merit that is equal to many iniquities. Shnemar yan ki nimsabo davar tov. It says about the son of, I want to say Yeravam ben Nevat, I can't remember, one of the evil kings, that because one good thing was found in him, then he received a proper burial. V'yesh avon shu k'neged kam zechiyos. So you could be one iniquity that corresponds to many merits. Shnemar, it says v'chot echad ya'abed tova harbe. One sinner can ruin lots of good. And here's the point: the ein shoklin ela bedato shel kel deos. This weighing is only done in the mind, quote unquote, of the God of minds, or the God of character traits. I'm not sure how the Rambam is using it here. He is the one who knows how to weigh the merits against the avonos. Okay, so the idea here is what Ariel was saying basically, is that we might have our own. So I guess the practical idea is that we might be tempted to attach our own valuation of our deeds, but in reality, our own valuation of our deeds, and our own assessment of the balance. But in reality, only God knows how, what the standards are, and only God knows how to weigh them correctly, right? So the practical, could we bring this to a practical application? I feel like there might be more than one, but what's the practical application? Like we've right now we have it as application in terms of mentality, but how does this translate into practicality? So I think one practical application, I'll just say a practical application. One practical application is that we need to constantly remind ourselves that we are largely ignorant of our own actions and their impact. Okay, and for good and for bad, Okay, and this is what the Rambam goes on to say in the same chapter. He says, oh, I already closed it. Hold on. And ordinarily I wouldn't go off topic into this so much, but this is the time of year, so we got to do it. He says, again, I'm skipping around here. He says, "Kashem sheshoklin avonos adam u'zechiyos b'shas misaso." Just like the avonos and zechiyos of a person are weighed at the time of his death, kach b'chol shana v'shana. So to each and every year, shoklin avonos ko echad v'echad mibaya olam im zechiyos b'yom tov shel Rosh Hashanah. So the zechiyos are weighed against the avonos of all inhabitants of the earth. I mean, each and every person is weighed on Rosh Hashanah, on the Yom Tov of Rosh Hashanah. Mishanim tzaddik, someone who's found to be a tzaddik, whose zechuyos outnumber the avonos in terms of weight, nechtam l'chaim, is sealed for life. Umishanim rasha, someone who's found to be wicked, meaning his avonos are greater than his zechuyos, nechtam l'misa, is sealed for death. Benoni, and the person in the middle, on half and half, tolin lo ad Yom Kippurim, hangs in the balance until Yom Kippur. Im asa teshuva, if he did teshuva, nechtam l'chaim, then he's sealed for life. Im lav, nechtam l'misa, and if not, he's sealed for death. Okay, and then I got to read two more paragraphs here. Three more. Two more. Lefikach, no. Even though the sounding of the shofar on Rosh Hashanah is a scriptural decree, remez yeshbo, there's an allusion in it. Klomar, meaning to say, uru yeshenim mishinaschem, wake up, you sleepers from your sleep. V'hikitzur nitadaschem, wake up, you deep sleepers from your deep slumber. V'chiptu b'maasechem, analyze your actions. V'chizru b'tshuva, and return to tshuva. V'zikru borachem, and remember your Creator. Elu hashochim es emes b'havle. These are the people who forget reality due to the illusions of the times. V'shogim kol shanasam behevel v'rik asher lo yo'il v'lo yatia. And they spend their entire year steeped in nothingness and emptiness that doesn't benefit and doesn't save. Look into your souls, and improve your ways and your actions. And each one of you abandon your evil way and your thought that's not good. Okay, then he says, and this is the point I wanted to get to. Lefikach, therefore, a person needs to, each and every person needs to view himself the entire year around as though he's half exonerated and half liable. Same thing with the whole world. Half exonerated and half liable. If you did one sin, then if he does one sin, he tips himself and the entire world to the side of liability and causes destruction for them. But if he did one mitzvah, if he does one mitzvah, he tilts himself and the entire world to the side of merit and causes salvation for them. This is what it means when it says the tzaddik is the foundation of the world. So it's not talking about a tzaddik, it's zeshet tzidek atzmo, someone who makes himself righteous. Hichriya es atzmo, hichriya es kol olam hatzilo, turns the entire world, tilts the entire world and saves it. So the idea here, according to my understanding, is it's very easy to dismiss one action and say, oh, what good is this going to do? Or how could this possibly harm me? But that is based on a wildly overconfident and inaccurate notion of your ability to weigh each action and to weigh it into your entire personality. You have no idea what one mitzvah could do to your development or what one avera could do to your development, and not even like your internal development. Like one mitzvah could lead to an entire cause and effect chain that leads you to do many other mitzvahs and learning and and completely change your whole personality. And one avera that you do could tilt you in a certain direction and make you lax in a certain area, and then totally unravel your development. So it's just again, it's wildly delusional to think that you can weigh individual mitzvahs and averos, and therefore, what's the only thing you can rely on? The only thing you could rely on is that you have a general guarantee that mitzvahs are good and averos are bad, and you should pursue these good things with the realistic expectation that it might have this life-changing effect, and not pass up an opportunity to do a mitzvah, and so too not realize that you should realize that one avera could throw you off. Again, I don't know, but this was actually a big factor in me deciding to give shiur tonight. I really have so much to do, and I don't know how the rest of this week is going to go, but I know that one good mishlei idea can change, I forget your lives, can change my life. If it changes your life, then even better, but for you, but so that's really the attitude that we should have. And so I think that this fits in really good, that imagine yourself trying to weigh something, okay, and you don't have access to the scale, and you don't have access to the things you're using to weigh them. Pretend we weigh things in pounds here, right? Or let's say you can, whatever unit you use. Let's say you go to a merchant in a foreign country and you're I want to buy this, can we weigh it? And he says, oh, I'm sorry, I can't show you the scale or what units we're using. You just wouldn't be able to move. And that's really what you should feel about your own actions. The only thing you can do is label it mitzvah or avera and know that mitzvahs are good and averos are bad, but you really can't do this particular weighing. Only God can do that. So, all right, Ariel, you talked me into it. You and the Rambam talked me into it. So I think this is a good interpretation. Okay. Any other things to add on to this one before we go into the next approach? Okay. And look, I did want to read one more halacha. The next halacha, the Rambam says, after viewing yourself in this way, because of this, nahagu kol beis Yisrael laharbos b'tzedakah of maasim tovim v'lasuk b'mitzvos b'mei Rosh Hashanah v'ad Yom Kippurim yeser mikol Yom Hashanah. Therefore, the entire house of Israel is accustomed to increase tzedakah and good deeds and be involved in mitzvos from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippurim more than the other days of the year. He's not explaining here why those days are special, but that's in other words, we should have a heightened awareness of how any mitzvah could change our life and any avera can change our life for bad during this time of year. And then he talks about slichos. So very, very timely message. So at least we got that for tonight, if nothing else. Okay, Rivki, you're up.
Okay, so mine, like, I think the parameters are kind of similar, but the focus is different.
Only Hashem knows the parameters. Yeah.
So I hope that it comes out clearly because I just feel like there's so much going on. But I was thinking that this is not like about how we see our own actions, but more how we see like the justice around us and like the world around us. So that the idea and like that applicableness of like Hashem being perfect, and we know that he is the one judge with like a capital J and a capital O, that I think is the same. But I think the difference is that sometimes we look around and we're like frustrated, like even like very practical, like October 7th, literally today, like we are very upset about that, obviously. And I was just actually talking about this with Sema today. Just like sometimes it's really, really challenging to be like, what the heck, Hashem? Like it feels so wrong. And it's like the first big thing, you know, in our lifetime that's like a Holocaust type event, you know?
Right.
But, and this is where this pasuk comes in, is to remind us that at the end of the day, like Hashem did give us justice and he did give us courts and all these things that we need in order to run the world in like the lower quote unquote realm. But at the end of the day, it's still like the fundamental idea and the fundamental reminder that we need to have is that all of the actions in the world that are Hashem's are actually mishpat, like mishpat with a capital mem, you know?
Okay.
So that's kind of the idea.
Okay, good. So Hashem's justice is the only true justice. Okay, so I'm not going to apologize if anyone's listened to this before, but I gave a shiur on Erev Rosh Hashanah about Hamelech HaMishpat, and it was an incomplete shiur because I couldn't quite work it out. But I think Rivki's idea is close enough to what I'm trying to work out in order to present this. Okay, I'm not going to read the whole thing. Oh, that's the article. Hold on. I wanted the sources. Hamelech HaMishpat. Hold on. Oop, not Ham. Not doing the Aseres Ymei Teshuvah. Hamelech HaMishpat. Why is my source document not coming up? Hamelech HaMishpat. Sources? Don't I have one that says sources? Okay, this is it. Yeah. Okay, so the problem, so in the 11th bracha of the Shemona Esrei, we changed the phrase Melech Ohev Tzedakah Mishpat to HaMelech HaMishpat. Okay, and I'm not going to go into the whole thing, but the problem is HaMelech HaMishpat, people translate as the King of Justice, but the literal translation is the King, the Justice, which grammatically does not make sense. Okay, and Rashi says, Rashi in his commentary on Shas says that oh, you know what, maybe I do need my article. I know I'm all confused. Is this one I'm on? Okay, that's the one I'm on. This is the one. Okay, yeah. Rashi says that this has bothered him for a very long time. But then the Ritva says, he says, the students of Rabbeinu Hagadol, the Ramban, wrote in his name that even if one said Melech Ohev Tzedakah Mishpat, he has to go back and repeat the Amida. This is known to those who understand the sod, the secret, the esoteric idea of why we say HaMelech HaMishpat, for this seems to be grammatically erroneous, but it is sweet to those who see the sun. So the question is, what is the sweetness? Like, what's the secret here? You know, HaMelech HaMishpat, it's a grammatical mistake. So what's the idea? So Rabbeinu Manoach ben Yaakov explains as follows. He says, first he gives a standard answer. He says, since the concept of Malchus, kingship, points to the hashgacha, the providence of the Lord to discipline anyone who is crooked in his path. And at this time, during the Aseres Ymei Teshuvah, the king of the universe sits on the throne of judgment to judge mankind. Therefore, they enacted it for us to say Hamelech HaMishpat. Even though all year round we also say Melech Ohev Tzedakah Mishpat, there's a difference between Melech Ohev, God who loves Tzedakah Mishpat, and Hamelech HaMishpat. For Melech Ohev implies that he loves for his creatures, meaning us, to conduct themselves with righteousness and justice, but Hamelech HaMishpat means that he judges the universe. So I think that's the way we typically think of it, that God judges the universe, and we're focusing on that idea at this time. But then he says what I think is the secret. Alternatively, the implication is that he himself is the justice. Just as we say that he is the knowledge and he is the wisdom, but we do not say about him that he is wise and he understands, which would seem as though he acquires wisdom and understanding from another source. Okay, and because these are the days of forgiveness and atonement, each man needs to awaken himself through his blessings that he recites to recognize his creator. Okay, fine. So in other words, he doesn't elaborate on this, okay, but I think it's the idea that Rivki is saying is that with a human judge, then what you're doing is, let's say I'm a judge, okay, and you come before me and you're suing your friend for not paying back the loan. So my job is to use my mind to understand the facts and then to understand abstract justice and say, is justice with you or with you? Like, are your actions in line with justice, or is this person? Okay, but I'm comparing your actions to a standard that is outside of myself that I'm using with my own mind. Okay, but God, when we talk about God being just, like Rivki said, people talk about God as though they're judging him by a standard outside of himself, saying like, how could you let October 7th happen? Like that is not just, right? And it's not just we have no choice but to speak inaccurately about God. Even Avraham Avinu said about Sodom and Gomorrah, "Hashovi kol haaretz lo yaseh mishpat." Will the judge of all the earth not do justice? But what's the reality? The reality is that God is one, and his will and wisdom are stem from his essence. It's not that God has to conform to some justice outside of himself, because that would imply that there's a higher existence than God. God's will is justice. So even when we say things like, how is what God did just? That's almost a false question, because God's will and his chachma is justice. He doesn't align himself with justice outside of himself. So I could not finish this article because I don't know exactly what the idea is, but I feel like we're dancing around the idea here, and it has to do with what Rivki is saying, which is that our pasuk is saying that it's not like the scales belong to everyone. It's that the scales and the weights only belong to God, that God's standards are the standards, and absolute justice only belongs to him. And our justice that we do is only an approximation to justice, and our justice that we understand is only an approximation to the true justice. I'm just going to write that down. The justice we practice is only an approximation to justice, and the justice we understand is only an approximation to absolute justice. But absolute justice belongs only to Hashem, HaMelech HaMishpat. Yeah.
Also just two more. First of all, I really liked that a lot. That was really nice. But just two more things. One is that I think that's also why I like that it says kol, like to show like that idea that it's not just like, once in a while Hashem like gets it right. Like no, like everything Hashem does is like within the realm of like actual mishpat and like physical, real things.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. And the other thing is that I think just practically that this idea, like when it actually sinks in, will take away a lot of like that frustration of like, well, why isn't this happening? And why is it happening?
Yeah.
So just practically speaking.
Okay, that's a great idea. So the practical application is that if we internalize this idea, it will take away a lot of our irrational complaints against God for not meeting our standards or expectations of justice. Yeah, that's another pasuk in Mishlei. I think we did this fairly recently. I have no recollection. I forget it. I never know which pasuk we've done in recent years. 13:6. Yeah. No. 19:3. Well, we did not do that recently. Ivelis Adam to Salif Darko Ve'al Hashem Yizaf Libo. The man's foolishness corrupts his way, but his heart rages at God. That it's only because of man's foolishness and him taking himself as absolute that he makes an accusation against God. But really, if you realize God's will is absolute and your will is the one that's not in line with reality, then like you'll get rid of this foolishness. Okay, good. Nice idea, Ricky. Okay, Isaiah.
All right, so I think my idea maybe takes elements from Ariel's and from Rifki's.
Okay.
So the way I'm thinking about it is, so the actions, God's actions are on one side of the scale, right? Like he uses those as the counterbalance to weigh other things.
Yeah.
So right, so like he uses those to weigh our actions. So what that means is that like so the scale and the balances are like Mishpat Hashem means like Hashem created the world, and he is the one who runs judgment. But the way that he does that is he compares the actions of those within the world to his own actions. His actions are like the standard of perfection, and like everyone else can look at his actions, and meaning what exists in the world and how God created it, etc., in order to understand like what the way to succeed in judgment is, to be even on the scales. Because if you're not, like, then you get judged poorly. So what the pasuk is like telling you to do is to learn about God's actions in order to know how to act and be judged favorably.
Okay, so the practical application is that in order to be judged favorably, you have to align yourself with God's actions in the world. Now, I have an example of this, but I want, if you have an example, then if you could give it first, then I'll make sure that I'm not projecting onto you.
Not really.
Okay, so I'll give an example of this, and I'm going to use specifically a not halachic example, but there are many cases where, like, let's take smoking. We could all agree with this. Okay, is that I'm sure for many years people smoked cigarettes and died horrible deaths from cancer, and accused God of being unjust when this person dies at a young age from a heart attack or from lung cancer or whatever, right? And for all of that time, they are basically assuming that this death is unjust and God committed something wrong here. Okay, but if we learn about God's actions, namely how lungs work and what smoke does and what smoking does, then we would get a favorable judgment because we would avoid smoking, and it would be, and so in other words, like that's how you really should operate with any judge, is that you find out what the standards are of this judge's justice and you align yourself with that and you've got a favorable judgment. So what are Hashem's what is Hashem's justice? Is his creation in the world, and the same is true in halacha. That, like, I was thinking about this on Rosh Hashanah, maybe something I read in the Rav, but like, we know that physics operates with 100% accuracy, right? That, like, if you, let's just use gravity or whatever, is that gravity works every time, and like we know the exact measurements. Okay, now in reality, our actions are subject to the exact same exactitude. Okay, that you do an avera, there will be exact 100% consequences. But because we're so ignorant and because there's so many factors, we don't even see the connection between the cause and the effect, and therefore we imagine that our actions are going to, oh, I know where I came up with this. Oops. This is spoiler for Thursday night Pirkei Avos here. So I won't say too much more about this now. But the idea is that, like, if we had full knowledge, we would see the same exactitude and inevitability in halacha and consequences of violating halacha and keeping halacha as we would in physics. Problem is that we don't have that level of knowledge. Excuse me. So we imagine that, like, Rishaim get away with evil, and like you can violate halacha and get away with it without having any consequences. But in reality, it is exactly the same. And so I think what Isaiah is suggesting is, like, you should use the Maaseh Hashem, God's creation, as the standard, and realize that that's how God's justice operates in all areas. Use this as the model and recognize that this happens in halacha, in mishlei, in thinking, etc. Okay, that there is absolute and exact justice in these realms, just as there is in the world of Maaseh Hashem. Okay. Any questions or comments on that?
Just a comment. I think that's a very meta idea, because I feel like that's literally exactly what the pasuk is.
Yeah. I mean, it's well, okay. Now I'm questioning. how is that different? How is saying it's a meta idea, because that's what the pasuk is, how is that different than saying it's a good interpretation of the pasuk? I just don't know if I know what you mean.
I guess, I don't know. I guess like because that idea is so fundamental and we see it in a lot of places.
Yeah.
But I think this pasuk is like a perfect exemplification of it, which is
Yeah.
like the point of the idea itself.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. I see where you're coming from now. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, Ayala?
Are you able to just elaborate a little bit more? I think I have some idea about on what you mean by if we had full knowledge, then we would
Yeah.
see, as is the case.
Yeah. I mean, like, let's say, for example, let me think of an example. I'm gonna use an easy example because I think if you see it in the easy cases, then it'll be easier to see it, or to imagine it elsewhere. Let's take Lashon Hara, right? So Lashon Hara causes a lot of harm to your own character and to the person who you're speaking it about and to the people who hear it, okay? And we're vaguely aware of that, okay? But let's say you could, detect and measure, like, with like scientific instruments, how speaking negatively about a person, like, shapes the way that you think of them and the way that other people think of them. And you could see, like, let's say, okay, imagine a thing where, like, this is total fiction here, but imagine a thing where you could see, you could have a brain scan of someone who you're talking to, okay, and you speak Lashon Hara to them about a mutual friend, and let's say you see a certain area in their brain turn red, okay, and then you see when they're going around and they see that person, that same red area lights up again, and you see that red area also causes this purple. And what's the purple? The purple is that instead of thinking about this person in terms of objectivity and what their actual worth is, you're thinking about them in a relative framework where you're judging them as less than you. But in order to judge them as less than you, you have to think of yourself as better than them. And now you start to measure yourself by all these subjective things. So you see the subjective part of your brain is lighting up in a certain degree. And then when you then go and you learn, or you are involved in work to make money, instead of thinking about, well, I'm learning because I want to understand, Hashem's chachma and I want to improve my life, or I'm making money so that I can, like, make a living, you instead, that subjectivity taints your relationship with Torah, and you start comparing yourself to other people and operating in a framework where, like, all that matters is ego. Let's say you could, like, measure this like fluid that's transferred, from one thing to another. You would see that every act of Lashon Hara that you speak has certain definite effects in the world that will then affect other things and harm things in a way that is as objective and measurable as in physics. It's just we lack the tools to measure and detect it, so we don't have access to Hashem's weights and his scales, but it is real, just like in physics. It happens to be that at another time in humanity, we didn't even have the ability to do this with physics, right? So, like, back then, they did not have an idea that the world works with like clockwork, where everything is exact and mathematical. So it's just, but now we have that technology, or that advancement of understanding. We just don't have that about morality and about halacha. But there's an equally real realm where there's a real cause and effect there. Yeah. And it is measurable, just not by us, only by Hashem. Yeah.
Would it ever be measurable? But, or some cases, I guess, could theoretically be partly measurable by us, right? Like in the Lashon Hara example you're saying,
right?
If we had
Yeah,
more knowledge.
We get glimpses and we can get more and less knowledge, but I think the thing that we can't see, and I don't think there's any way to see this, is I think in other words, you could look at a particular instance and see a harm on a surface, but there's no way to see your full character and all of your perfections and imperfections and how this shifts the balance. It's just too, it's kind of analogous to the weather, okay? That meteorologists know enough that they could see certain trends, or they know how, if a storm is going in this direction, what trajectory it's going to take. But the reason why they cannot predict, weather exactly, and they certainly can't predict weather, let's say, like, in 10 years, right? That's a good example. Let's say let's say scientists understood everything about hurricanes right now, and you tell them, can you predict the hurricanes in 10 years? They'd say we can't. Okay, why not? Because there's so many other factors that even if we had full knowledge of the phenomena, like in terms of theory, we wouldn't know all the particulars, so there's no way we can see how it's going to play out. So I think that knowledge is going to be forever barred from human beings. Because like, let's take every person. Like, in order to see how Lashon Hara is going to affect you, for example, I have to really know all of your childhood experiences, and all of your like self-talk and all, like just there's too many factors that are known. I have to know your exact mood at the time that you hear the Lashon Hara. It's just, I don't see how that's ever going to be accessible. Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm glad you asked that because that clarified it for me too. Okay. Anyone else have ideas, or should we go into some of the meforshim here? I'm already happy, by the way. So we're yote me being happy. These are all good Aseres Ymei Teshuvah ideas. Yeah. Okay. Now let's go into. Okay, let's start with the Mitzvahs David. I translated all these with ChatGPT because I just didn't have time to translate myself today. So he says, Peles. Hine yesh biyad Hashem Peles umoznaim. Behold, the Lord has in his hand scales and balances. Lishkol behem mishpat tashlumin umaasehu. To measure in terms of tashlumin is like they say recompense, meaning reward and punishment. Umasehu b'devar hatashlumin, his actions regarding recompense, hukumo kol avne kis. They're like all the stones of the pouch. Haim avne hamishkal hanusunim ba'am tachas. They're the weights placed in the sack. V'ish sham rabe hamishkal uktane hamishkal. There are stones that have heavy weight and less weight. And so too, God measures out recompense to everyone according to their merit. Okay, so the question is this encompassed in our ideas, or is there a new main idea? I mean, he's putting a lot more emphasis on the stones than we have, and he seems to be learning using the pouch of stones as like there's a stone for every deed. Like everyone has a specific thing that it corresponds to. So again, it could be that this is just one aspect of our ideas. Let's just think if we see anything new here. I mean, what I'm getting from this is I think that there is, again, I'm not saying this is a new idea, but there is a feeling of like uncertainty that you're going to get what you're owed, or that the bad guy's going to get what they deserve. I think that's how we typically feel about it. Obviously, it applies the other way also, that your enemies do get rewarded for the good that they do, and you get punished for the bad that you do. But imagine like this. Imagine you are buying gold from a merchant, okay? And so he has weights that are absolutely calibrated on a balance, and he's putting on, let's say, I don't know, gold coin after gold coin, until it gets to the exact weight, so you're going to be on edge until you see that that the weight is exactly it, and then you're going to be rest assured that he's giving you everything he owes you. So I think it's trying to show that here, that when it comes to God dishing out reward and punishment, then you can be sure you're going to get exactly how much you're owed, or people are going to get exactly how much they're owed, because God has all of the finest measures of weight and can get exactly the right amount. Yeah.
This kind of made me realize about the pasuk that, I guess, I don't know if other people were thinking about it like this, but I was thinking of having the stones that God puts on one side and like something else on the other side. Yeah. But it seems maybe like he's saying that there's stones of scar and stones of onesh.
Right.
And like the balance, how far it's tilted is like what the din is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's good. Yeah. So yeah, we were looking at it, I don't know in all of ours, but we were looking at it in terms of our actions are being weighed, or other people's actions are being weighed. This is in terms of how much reward and punishment he gives us. And it goes down to fine measurements. It's like if you are, I guess the time I'm most used to weights and measurements is with the cooking, so like that you got a tablespoon measure and you got a teaspoon, you got like half a teaspoon and a quarter teaspoon. But like if I ever have to have a 1/16 of a teaspoon, I just have to eyeball it. Like I can't, like I don't have something that's that small, but God's measures go down to the exact amount. And so you can be sure that you're getting, so you can be sure that everyone gets exactly as much reward and punishment as they deserve. So now the question here is, what is the practical application? Yeah, Rifki, do you have a question or another approach?
I mean, maybe this will answer the question.
Okay, sure.
I was just thinking like something that popped into my head that I don't know if maybe other people were thinking this before, but it just hit me that I like how he says at the end that like each person is going to get exactly what they actually deserve, which I think like, actually works kind of like what I was trying to say, although I didn't say it before, that like if I do something and then you do something and it's the same thing, like same mitzvah, let's say, but we get different rewards, like whatever it is.
Right.
I could be like annoyed. I'm like, well, why didn't I get that? But this is saying no, like it's not about that because we don't have like all of those tools in our toolbox.
Okay, so the emphasis on each person getting exactly what they deserve for their actions. Yeah, and I'm going to just add to this also. I mean, I think there's different applications, but I want to add that one rationalization for, let's say, not doing a mitzvah is you diminish the reward in your own mind. But hold on, I had a thought there. Diminish in your own mind. But in reality, the reward will be exactly the right amount. Okay. And what I mean by that is like in Mortimer Adler's book on ethics, The Ethics of Enough, he talks about how the concept of enough can't be wrong. Like if the body needs, like needs a certain amount of water, certain amounts of nutrients or whatever. So if you said about a normal human being, like, no, your body needs too much sodium, you'd be like, what do you mean needs too much sodium? If it needs that much sodium, then that is exactly the right amount that it needs, so yeah, if you have a disease or whatever, then it could throw things out of whack. But like you can't say like the concept of need dictates an exact amount, which will be enough. So if you think about it, like, how much reward am I going to get? Well, you're going to get exactly the right amount. How can you logically argue with that? Like, I don't want the right amount, or like, no, it's exactly like the right amount. And same thing, for punishment, right? Is that people feel like it's not going to be that much. No, you're going to get the right amount of punishment. And it is individually tailored. Yeah, everything is individually tailored to the deed and the person. For example, Moshe Rבינו. Actually, I'm going to use Miriam. Miriam speaking Lashon Hara, and me speaking Lashon Hara. Right, so she got a much worse punishment for much lesser form of Lashon Hara than what we would get. Okay, all right, that's good enough for me for the Mezuzah David. Okay, let's do so I'm gonna do Rבינו and Yona because this I only skimmed it, but this looks really different. It says Chamisha psukim chiber Shlomo Aleph Shalom b'midos hamalachim. So Shlomo composed 5 psukim about the characteristics of kings, in this regard. So the reason why this pasuk about Hashem, so in other words, there's psukim about kings, which we're doing, but then this one is about Hashem because his justice is going to be forever and it's not going to cease. Sometimes a human king will not want justice, and he will vindicate the Russia. Sometimes he will be ignorant of the truth. Even though he will not betray his mouth with justice. So even though a wicked person can be saved from a human king's judgment, they're not going to be saved from Hashem's judgment. Yeah. So what I find interesting about this is it's comparing it to human kings. So the question is like, what's the main idea here? We weren't really comparing God's justice to human, to the justice done by a human king. Human king, like a corrupt human king or someone who made a mistake. We were comparing our actions and our standards to that. So I'm just, what is the angle at here? I have a weird idea. Yeah, Benji.
I mean, it doesn't seem like such a big chiddush, but there, like with a human king, there could be like an insecurity because he could do whatever he wants to you,
Yeah.
and he can make a mistake.
Yeah.
So with God, there he knows
Okay.
everything. He won't make a mistake, and he won't be like strayed to do a certain way.
Okay, good. Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. I was gonna say we even though it's irrational to do this, we project all our insecurities and suspicions about human kings onto Hashem. Like for example, we distrust humans to make accurate judgments or to be totally free of corruption, and we I'll just say we project that onto Hashem when it's totally inapplicable. So I think that's the emphasis here. Again, this is like a good example. Like intellectually, there's no havamina. Like this is obvious, but emotionally, if you're not aware that you're doing this, then you're going to fall into a lot of bad traps here. So this is like pointing that out. And it is also just very interesting. Ooh, do I have a hot take? Yeah, maybe I have a hot take. All right, I'll say it. I'll say it. You might think, we have a presidential election coming up, right? And people have strong feelings about the candidates on either side, right? So you might think that if someone is enamored with the wrong candidate, okay, or hates a certain candidate, okay, and you can fill in whichever names you want, you might think that the worst consequence that's going to happen is what they do politically, like what they vote or like what stances they take, whatever, But you know what else this is going to do? It's going to corrupt their idea of God, okay? Because if you admire a certain type of politician and you look up to them as like being ideal, we have no choice but we have choice. It is human nature to project that model of leadership onto Hashem. So you better be careful and make sure that your people who you people who you admire, really the vote is a separate thing, but who you admire, especially be sure that they're fulfilling the halacha, walking in God's ways, because to the extent that they have bad midos, you're going to associate those midos with Hashem without realizing it, and that's a scary thing. So there's metaphysical implications to favoring the wrong candidate, as well as political implications. And obviously, look, if you can separate yourself from that and vote, without letting your view get tainted, then that's the best thing. But it's again, it's going to happen a lot. Yeah, it'd be very interesting to look throughout Jewish history and see if you could find let's say, for example, when the Jews were under Greek kings versus Roman kings versus Babylonian kings, did they have certain flaws about how they viewed Hashem that corresponded to the way, like we see this by Mitzrayim, right? The Jews had a certain relationship with Paro, and that affected the relationship with Hashem. It'd just be interesting to see evidence of that throughout Jewish history and see how we fall into that trap in different ways. Okay. Yeah, Ayala?
Just another possible idea from Rabbeinu Yona, which is like very different than what we've been saying so far. And maybe I'm just reading into it, is that maybe like when we're dealing with a human king, like these are two things that we have to be aware of that Rabbeinu Yona is pointing out. Yeah. And when like making practical decisions, when you're living under a king, you have to take those into account, but you should also take into account that true justice is going to be carried out by Hashem.
Okay, that's good. I like that also, yeah. And I think it makes sense that the main practical implication is going to be how you view other kings, because that's the cluster of pasukim here. I think I was driven by my, like, Shlomo HaMelech is definitely giving you an aside, saying, hey, by the way, now that we're talking about kings, just remember that there is a king who is just. So I was kind of interpreting Rabbeinu Yona as an idea about that detour. But I think in terms of the takeaway from what Rabbeinu Yona is telling us, and I think what you're saying is really good. Okay. On a primary level, just be aware that human kings can make both kinds of mistakes, but they are subject. Sorry, but everyone will get justice from the true king. Yeah, Benji?
I'm not sure if this fully fits, but the example you were looking for examples. I was like hearing about the Jews in Europe after they like basically got more rights from the Christian leaders. They started a movements of secularism. So maybe like when they were given more rights from their leaders and more freedom, they didn't want to be restrained by the Torah. Like when they were
that's really interesting. Yeah,
by their secular leaders, they were used to it.
Yeah.
When they got freedom, they're like, why do we need to follow these rules?
Right. That's a good example. That's also a good example just because I think the easier place to see that, easier than the political realm, even though that's what we're talking about, is with parents who spoil their kids. You know, if you have a permissive parent, that kid is not going to have a good relationship with halacha, you know, with a God who commands and restricts him. Yeah. Okay, let's do one more. As much as I would love to do the Meiri, who was it? The Malbim caught my eye. Okay, let's just see what the Malbim says here. He says, so he learns it differently. He says, Peles who, okay, yeah, I don't know if I understand. Okay. No, he learns, this is not plumb line. I'm just gonna say Peles. Okay, I don't know what he learns this with. Let's just see if we can get anything out of this. A scale and just balances belong to Hashem. All the stones of his pouch are his work. The Peles is larger than the balances and is essentially used for measuring the circle. No, I don't think this is the circle. I think Magal in modern Hebrew might be circle. No, measuring the path, which is no, maybe he does learn in a circle. Suvuvi. I don't know what he means. Hold on. What caught my eye about this? Well, this is the part that caught my eye. We'll read all of it in here. I don't know if there's a good translation. The Peles is larger than the balances and is used for measuring the circle. Is essentially used for measuring the circle, which is the circular path to measure the place closest to the desired destination. Don't know what that means. In balances, one places the item to be weighed on one side and the weights on the other side to see if they balance each other. He says that Hashem has a Peles. Again, I don't know if plumb line is the right word here. A Peles to weigh a person's ways, behaviors, and paths, aligning them with straightness. Okay, that is like a plumb line, is making sure it's level. Additionally, he has just balances to weigh the deeds of people and to reward or punish them according to their measure. And what are the stones of the pouch that are placed within these balances? They are his deeds, meaning that Hashem has set all of creation in such a way that human actions are weighed against them. Just as a person places his actions on one side of the scale, so too are Hashem's deeds, the natural order and the cosmic system balanced in response. Oh, that's nice. I'll just read this in Hebrew. Yeah. As it is said, if you will surely listen to my commandments, I will give the rain of your land in its time. But beware lest your hearts be misled and the heavens closed. There are all kinds of weights in Hashem's deeds, both large and small, all of which are just weights calibrated to the scale of Hashem's actions in the grand universe. These stand against the other side of the scale, where a person places his own chosen actions in his microcosm. Both sides of the scale move together at all times, whether for good or for bad. Okay, I clearly don't get all of his stuff, and I just don't have the time and energy right now to go through it. Let's stop for tonight. There's probably other good ideas, and I might look through it again, and I can post it in the after party chat. But I gotta stop for tonight. Okay, so we had 3 main ideas from you. So we had Ariel's idea / reference to the Rambam's thing, which is that God's judgment is perfect and ours is flawed. Our sense of that is flawed. And you have to remember God is using his standards, and you shouldn't attach your own valuation to your deeds and think that you're right, because only God knows the right valuation. Only God knows how to weigh them correctly. And the best you can do is actions that God himself designates as good, like mitzvos, and then the opposite with averos, that you could do. And that's going to be your best bet, instead of trying to like imagine that you can weigh stuff out and determine it on your own. Rivki's idea is about how we look at the world around us and judging Hashem and like holding him accountable for injustice, when really he is justice, as we say in the tefla, and he's not subject to some external justice. but you are, so for you to impose your preconceived notion about justice onto God is to really reverse the situation. And that could, the practical application is that if you internalize this, it'll take away a lot of your complaints and suffering. Isaiah's idea is that if you want the judge's favor, align yourself with his principles. And what are his principles? Study nature. This is the message of meforshim Shabbos. This is the message of Eov, that the more you study nature, the more real it'll become to you that there are exact consequences to your actions in halacha and in morality, just like there are in the world around you. And that point will be driven home, and there's no way you can calculate it. Metzudas David's idea was that there is an exact quantity for reward and punishment distribution tailored to you and your deeds. And Hashem has all the teaspoons. He has all the different measurements for how much it's going to be. So don't worry that it's not going to be exact. And in fact, if you think it's going to be less than it should be, no, by definition, it is what it should be. And it's going to be objectively good. And then the Rביnu Yona's idea that we just did, my application was, well, the primary idea, as Ayala explained, was be aware that human kings can make these two mistakes. And then my idea for explaining Shlomo's deviation is that don't make these projections onto Hashem. Okay, and I guess the moral of the story is we've got how many days left of Aseres Ymei Teshuvah? Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Right, so 5 days left. We're halfway through. So this is the time to implement this idea and start, doing mitzvos, extra mitzvos, because you don't know what one mitzvah could tip the scale for good, and avoiding averos because the reverse can also happen. But yeah. Okay, so as far as I know, next week should be on. I'm not going to give shiur during Chol Hamoed Sukkos. And maybe not the week after because I'm traveling. But next week, as far as I know, should be on. Neder. Okay, everyone have a good Aseres Ymei Teshuvah and Gemar Chasima Tova.
Baruch Hashem Tov.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.